Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, dear guests, dear colleagues, Second World War veterans, and most importantly, Holocaust survivors. It is my great honor to welcome you to this annual observance of the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust. My name is Melissa Fleming, and I am Undersecretary General for Global Communications, and we are sincerely grateful to the survivors who will address us on this solemn occasion. We know that sharing your experiences of the Holocaust comes at great cost, and we acknowledge and appreciate the courage it takes to do so. Today, as we begin the observance of the International Day, may I ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection in remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. Could I ask those who are able to kindly stand? Thank you. Nearly 20 years ago, the member states of the United Nations came together in this hall and passed a resolution that designated the 27th of January as the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust. This resolution committed the United Nations to Holocaust remembrance and education, and it tasked the United Nations to create and facilitate opportunities for learning and reflection about the Holocaust, to counter anti-Semitism, to counter bigotry, racism, and prejudice. I want to acknowledge the significant contribution of a Holocaust survivor, Rabbi Arthur Schneier, in bringing about this resolution. Dear guests, we meet at a time of great pain triggered by the abhorrent terror attacks by Hamas on October 7th. At this time, learning and reflection become even more crucial. Learning and reflection form a critical antidote to hatred and division. So it feels especially important that we gather here to reflect on the humanity of the victims of the Holocaust. We must never forget the 6 million Jewish children, women, and men who were annihilated, 2/3 of Europe's pre-war Jewish population. We must remember their lives and the culture that had existed for centuries, which the Holocaust ruptured irrevocably. And the same was true for the life and culture of Roma and Sinti, whom the Nazis persecuted and murdered, murdering some 500,000, a quarter of their population in Europe. But the Nazis did not destroy the extraordinary courage of victims and survivors of the Holocaust, and this we must also never forget. Courage is our theme for today's observance. It is now my honor to welcome Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, to deliver his remarks.
Excellencies, dear friends, today we honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. I am moved and humbled by the presence of Holocaust survivors and their families joining us both online and in person. Each of you carries the memories of communities lost, lives destroyed or changed beyond recognition, and lives rebuilt. I thank you for sharing those memories with us and with the world. All of us, leaders and citizens, have a responsibility to listen and to learn from what you have to say and to act on it. by condemning these terrible crimes against our common humanity, by striving to eradicate anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry, hatred, and intolerance, and by finding a way forward to a shared, safe, and inclusive future for our human family. And this is particularly important in today's dangerous and divided world. And a few short months after Hamas' horrific terror attacks, in which so many innocent Israeli civilians and citizens of other countries were killed. Excellencies and friends, every year on this day, the day of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, we honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. We come together in solidarity and sorrow to pay tribute to 6 million Jewish children, women and men murdered in the Holocaust. And we grieve the Roma and Sinti. And we mourn the millions of others tortured, starved, and killed by the Nazis and their collaborators. And today, in particular, in keeping with this year's theme, we recognize the courage of victims and survivors. There are countless stories of bravery and resilience from the Holocaust, from those who resisted the Nazis' brutality through armed struggle or quiet dignity, to the individuals, families, and communities providing support, solidarity, and even a semblance of normality in the face of dehumanization, deprivation, and death. And survivors who have had the courage to tell their stories to a world that has not always wanted to listen. Beacons of bravery shroud from the hell of Auschwitz itself and from across the world ravaged by Nazi ideology and hate. I think of people like Rudolf Vrba, a Slovak teenager who was deported to Auschwitz. With Alfred Wetzler, he achieved the extraordinary feat of breaking out of the camp to warn the world of the Nazis' unspeakable crimes. I think of Rosa Robota, a young Polish woman who plotted with others to destroy the crematoria. She was tortured and hanged by the Nazis, never revealing the secrets of the Auschwitz resistance of which she was a part. And I think of those thousands of acts of courage and fortitude of which we will never know. The parents who contained their terror to comfort a child, the prisoners who risked Nazi wrath to perform small acts of kindness, and the individuals who found the strength to retain their sense of self despite all attempts to demolish it. We remember and revere today all such acts of bravery. Excellencies and friends, the anti-Semitism that fueled the Holocaust did not start with the Nazis, nor did it end with their defeat. The Holocaust was preceded by thousands of years of discrimination, expulsion, exile, and extermination, including by my own country, Portugal. Today we are witnessing hate spreading at alarming speed. Online it has moved from the margins to the mainstream, and Holocaust denial and distortion are proliferating. It's up to all of us to defend the truth and to defend our common humanity. Working together, we must combat online lies and hate. We must promote Holocaust education as a critical part of our defense against ignorance, indifference, and intolerance. And crucially, we must listen to survivors, and we must remember that demonization of the other and disdain for diversity is a danger to everyone, that no society is immune to intolerance, and worse, and that bigotry against one group is bigotry against all. As the former Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom, Jonathan Sacks, said, "The hate that begins with Jews never ends with Jews." Excellencies, friends, our common humanity is at the heart of the United Nations. Racism and bigotry are a violation of everything we stand for, and we are determined to fight it on all its forms. For me, this is a lifelong commitment, and for the United Nations, a foundational mission. And today is more important than ever, especially in the wake of the horrific 7 October Hamas attacks that claimed the lives of more than 1,000 Israelis and others, injured many more, and resulted in the brutal seizing of hostages, hostages that must be immediately and unconditionally released. In the last several months, we have seen an outburst of anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bigotry around the world. Every one of us must resolve to stand up against the forces of hate, discrimination, and division. We must condemn anti-Semitism unequivocally whenever and wherever we encounter it. And I'm pleased that the High Representative of the UN Alliance of Civilizations, Miguel Moratinos, is serving as United Nations focal point to enhance global efforts to address anti-Semitism. And we must equally condemn all other forms of racism, prejudice, and religious bigotry, including anti-Muslim hatred and violence against minority Christian communities. Let us never be silent in the face of discrimination and never tolerant of intolerance. Let us speak out for human rights and the dignity of all. Let us never lose sight of each other's humanity and never let down our guard. To all who confront prejudice and persecution, I say clearly, you are not alone. The UN stands with you, and to all those past and present who have had the courage to share their stories of the Holocaust so the world can know the truth, I say thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. His Excellency, Mr. Dennis Francis, the President of the 78th session of the General Assembly, is unable to join us in person today, but we are pleased to be able to share this recorded message.
Your Excellency Gilad Erdan, Permanent Representative of Israel to the United Nations, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me acknowledge in particular the Holocaust survivors who are joining us for this solemn remembrance event today. The International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 27th of January, marks 79 years since the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest of the Nazi concentration and death camps. Today we honor the lives of the 6 million Jewish people, Roma, Sinti, and countless others who suffered and perished during the horrors of the Shoah. It is with profound humility that we mark this occasion in the presence and grace of those who survived this unparalleled depravity. The poignant accounts and extraordinary courage of survivors shocked the world and summoned humanity to action nearly 8 decades ago. Today, those who tragically perished and the survivors are the powerful animating force behind all we do at the United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to promote and defend human rights, and to work relentlessly for a more just and peaceful world. It is true, as Elie Wiesel observed, that for the dead and the living we must bear witness. Promoting the memory and education about the Holocaust is therefore essential to ensuring that the crime of genocide is never seen as either normal or justifiable in any circumstance, and therefore to work towards ensuring that it is never repeated. The harrowing stories of the survivors and those who risked their lives to save them play a central role in our collective remembrance of this dastardly episode in human history. They are stories of ordinary people who took extraordinary actions to resist unspeakable brutality. People like Joanna Eck, who sheltered Jews in her small apartment, like Irina Sendler, who smuggled children safely out of the Warsaw Ghetto, and like Jean Darman, a teacher who joined a rescue network to save Jewish children. There are countless more heroes and heroines who rose to the occasion in the face of enormous personal danger to save innocent souls from an unthinkable tragedy. They are reminders of our duty to deter, repudiate, and counter hatred and intolerance without any reserve, wherever such heinous crimes against humanity occur. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot and must not be complacent. We see an alarming surge in hate speech across the world, while rising anti-Semitism and xenophobia have stoked fears that Auschwitz is only sleeping, as Sieger Stoicher, a survivor of Roma descent, once described it. Today and every day, we must recommit to do more than just say never again. We must live our lives daily by this mantra. The Holocaust must forever be a warning to all of us to stay vigilant against widespread hatred, racism, prejudice, and intolerance, divisive and destructive views and forces that seek deliberately to dehumanize and often to demonize human beings on the most spurious of grounds. In the memory of those who were lost, and in honor of those who survive, we must strive towards a common future that is safer, free from fear, and characterized by mutual respect, tolerance, and harmony. It is high time we learn to live together as equals in dignity and respect for all, by all. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and I would now like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Gilad Erdan, the permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations, to deliver his remarks.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Ambassador Lipstadt, colleagues, friends, and distinguished Holocaust survivors here with us today. 64 years ago, at the trial of the arch-Nazi Adolf Eichmann, the legendary Israeli Attorney General Gideon Hausner opened the prosecution with a haunting message that has been etched into the Jewish ethos. But should he be giving his speech today, these would be his words. When I stand before you here, I am not standing alone. With me are 6 million accusers who perished in the Holocaust. And with me are the 1,200 accusers who were butchered on October 7th. With me are the 136 hostages still being held in Hamas terror tunnels. But they cannot rise to their feet and point an accusing finger. for their ashes are strewn in the fields of Auschwitz and Treblinka, in the fields of Be'eri and Kfar Aza. Their screams are not palpable from the terror tunnels under Gaza. Their blood cries out, but their voices are not heard. So I shall be their voice. From the crimes of the Nazis and their collaborators until the crimes of Hamas and radical Islam today, the genocidal ideology of exterminating the Jews has remained the same. Today is not only a day of remembrance. This day was designated to also prevent future acts of genocide, to internalize the lessons of the Holocaust, to never be silent, as silence, in the words of Elie Wiesel, encourages the tormentor, never the tormented, and indifference, not death, is the opposite of life. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists murdered, raped, beheaded, and burned families alive. They gunned down young people at a music festival as if it was Babi Yar, and turned entire communities to ash. Every decent, every moral person understands that this was an attempted genocide. We have heard the testimonies of Holocaust survivors who, once again on October 7th, had to face those who seek to wipe the Jews from the earth. Ruth Haran, an 88-year-old resident, described seeing the corpses of children and babies strewn across the lawns of her community. Her son was murdered. Her daughter, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren were taken hostage. She survived humanity's darkest moment, and what she experienced on October 7th was, in her own words, a genocide. Hamas Nazis came to murder Jews as if we are subhuman. Hamas came to exterminate us, and they have sworn to repeat these horrors again and again and again until Israel and the Jews are destroyed. Every Jew is murdered. Ladies and gentlemen, to this day, no UN institution has condemned the October 7th massacre. It's shocking. Even the International Court of Justice, for heaven's sake, did not see it morally fitting to condemn Hamas's barbaric massacre against our children and people. This silence is unfathomable. The United Nations was founded upon the commitment to prevent atrocities, to prevent genocide, to be a living testament that never again is not just a slogan, but an action plan. Yet today, the UN has become one of the weapons in the arsenal of modern-day Nazis against us. Every UN body has become weaponized against the Jewish state, exploited as an instrument to aid in the elimination of my people. How symbolic it is, how symbolic is it that on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it was exposed that UNRWA employees took part in the massacre. The UN is not only weaponized to delegitimize our existence, but also to physically exterminate us. Contemplate this. Today of all days, the day that we commemorate the genocide of the Jewish people and swear here never again, the International Court of Justice made it clear that it won't reject outright the case of a Nazi terror organization that seeks to commit genocide against the Jewish people. It's outrageous. Every year we dedicate this day to discuss the surging Jew hatred poisoning the world. And this year, the year in which the largest number of Jews were massacred since the Holocaust, anti-Semitism has risen to heights not seen since the Nuremberg laws. we can only draw one conclusion, a sad conclusion. The UN has failed in its mission, has failed. I will not stand here and list all the UN's shortcomings in combating anti-Semitism. I will not discuss the singling out of Israel at the Human Rights Council, the bias of the WHO, or all other UN bodies. It's plain and clear. If you count the number of UN resolutions and condemnations, it's obvious that Israel, the only vibrant liberal democracy in the Middle East, is the #1 threat to world peace. But we know what we are outside of this building. We know very well. And I pray here today, I pray that one day the UN will cease its indifference, cease its lies, cease siding with terrorists, that the UN will stand by Israel's side, stand by its founding ideals. We, the Jewish people, understand the meaning of genocide more than any other people. We have been persecuted for millennia, and Hitler seared the meaning of genocide into our DNA. But on October 7th, Hamas tore open that wound. On International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the day that even the ICJ proved to the world that the lessons of the Holocaust were not learned, I stand here in the name of the State of Israel, in the name of all those murdered by the Nazis and Hamas, and I swear we will not forget. Never again is now. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Erdan. I would now like to invite Her Excellency, Dr. Deborah E. Lipstadt, the United States Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, to deliver her remarks.
The United States General Assembly designated January 27th, the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, as International Holocaust Remembrance Day, a time to remember the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and the millions of other victims of Nazi persecution. We are here today to recognize the importance of commemorating this day and to recognize the extraordinary courage of the victims and the survivors of the Holocaust. In that vein, I would like to thank and welcome the extraordinary survivors who are with us today, including Edith Tannenbaum Shapiro, her sister Selma Tannenbaum Shapiro, and Christian Feil. It is a true privilege to be here with you. The Holocaust stands as a testament to the dangers of prejudice, discrimination, and dehumanization. It serves as a stark reminder of the catastrophic consequences of unchecked hatred. By preserving the memory of the Holocaust, we ensure that future generations are educated about the atrocities committed against the Jewish people, as well as others, including Roma, people with disabilities, Jehovah's Witnesses, and LGBTQ+ persons. We do so in order to foster empathy and tolerance. Remembering and understanding the history of the Holocaust is crucial in the battle against anti-Semitism. The United States has chosen to shine a bright light upon the singular catastrophe that was the Holocaust by ensuring that young people are educated about what the Nazis did, how they did it. The Never Again Education Act, signed into law with near unanimous bipartisan support, is a bulwark against the growing Holocaust denial and distortion. Together with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the State Department has facilitated a variety of exchanges with Holocaust educators on curriculum development and teaching. Through remembrance, we honor the millions of Jews and others who suffered and perished, reinforcing the commitment to building a world where tolerance, diversity, and respect prevail over bigotry and hatred. Since October 7th, terrorist attacks on Israel by Hamas and its allies, a tidal wave of anti-Semitism, including Holocaust distortion, has swept across the globe. Manipulating Holocaust history or misappropriating Holocaust terms disrespects the immense suffering of the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. Recent history demonstrates how Holocaust denial and distortion and other forms of anti-Semitism are linked with other forms of intolerance, hate crimes, and efforts to undermine democracy. Hatred directed at any one marginalized group fosters social division, breeds distrust, spreads to other minority groups, and ultimately poses a threat to national security and stability for all people. The Holocaust provides a historical lens through which individuals, civil society, and governments can recognize warning signs and take early action. To that end, last year, the Biden-Harris administration released the first ever United States national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. President Biden did this because speaking out with moral clarity and confronting hatred and bigotry, although a critical obligation of leaders, is not sufficient. The United States national strategy is a whole-of-government approach to combating anti-Semitism. It is a comprehensive framework which we believe can also be a model for other countries and the United Nations as a whole. In honoring the memory of Holocaust victims, we also recommit to building a more compassionate and inclusive world, allowing the lessons of the past to steer us towards a future free from the shackles of hate. Victims and survivors of the Holocaust endured unimaginable horrors. We, in turn, must do all we can to remember the Holocaust, acknowledge what the Jewish people and other victims endured, and work together to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. Never again. That is our collective obligation today and every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lipstadt, the Special Envoy of the United States to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nazis targeted Roma and Sinti for genocide. Before the killing began, Roma and Sinti communities were subjected to persecution and discrimination. The Nazis encouraged prejudices that existed centuries against Romani peoples and expanded on existing discriminatory legislation to justify the abuses. The story of the File family reflects the impact of the Holocaust on Roma and Sinti, and I am pleased to invite Mr. Christian File to share his reflections with us, and he's accompanied by his nephew, Mr. Sascha Höhn.
Sehr geehrte
Dear Mr. Secretary General, dear world community, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
Schale und Joviale
is the greeting in Romani, the language of the Sinti and Roma. I am very moved that I am able to address the United Nations today on the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust as a survivor and representative of Sinti and Roma. This is an important sign of international recognition of the forgotten Holocaust of the Sinti and Roma, which was ignored and denied for decades and is still far too little anchored in the consciousness of our societies today. Today we commemorate the persecuted, murdered, and survivors of the Holocaust, the 500,000 murdered Sinti and Roma, and the 6 million murdered Jews in Nazi-occupied Europe. The Holocaust was the culmination of centuries of anti-Gypsyism and anti-Semitism in Germany and Europe. It was an industrial murder of people solely on the basis of their origin, which was meticulously implemented by the entire state bureaucracy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a Holocaust survivor and Sinti from Germany. Back in May 1940, my entire family was deported from our hometown of Trier to the camps in German-occupied Poland simply because they were Sinti. My oldest sister, Berta, was 12 when she was deported to the camps, and my youngest brother, Ludwig, was only 3 years old. Sorry.
Meine Geschwister haben
My siblings told me that all of the children, even the very young ones, had to do hard, forced labor, such as building roads and digging trenches. There was almost nothing to eat. Potato peelings were a feast. Whenever there was dry bread, and it was very dry, it was shared out among us. Throughout the years, we suffered from great hunger and the fear of freezing to death or being murdered. I myself was born in the Lublin ghetto in the beginning of 1944. My mother had to take me to work wrapped in a piece of cloth, and she lay me next to her in the snow during the winter months. It was a miracle that I and my immediate family survived. When asked how this was possible, after 5.5 years in camp, my parents said, "Obaro deve unidepski dai his passe mende." God and the Mother of God were with us. However, many of my close relatives did not survive the Holocaust. Many were gassed and murdered in Auschwitz. Ladies and gentlemen, the end of the war, however, did not mean the end of exclusion, humiliation, and persecution for us Sinti and Roma. In the state authorities of the Federal Republic of Germany, perpetrators who were responsible for the deportation and persecution of our families during the Nazi era took the decisions about our compensation claims. Anti-Gypsyism continued uninterrupted in Germany and Europe and led to racist exclusion, indeed a form of apartheid, against the largest minority in many European countries. It was only thanks to the courageous civil rights movement of Sinti and Roma, including many Holocaust survivors, but also subsequent generations, that our minority was able to fight for recognition of the Nazi crimes and recognition as a national minority in the 1970s and 1980s. It took 4 decades until the then German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt recognized the genocide of Sinti and Roma under international law in 1982. The German federal president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, in 2022 described this anti-Gypsyism and the continued injustice against Sinti and Roma after 1945 as a second persecution and asked Sinti and Roma for forgiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, it fills me with great concern when I see the rise of nationalism and right-wing extremism in the world today. My family and I have had to experience what racist hatred and violence can lead to. I myself, in the 1990s, experienced 2 right-wing extremist attacks on my person and on my business. The legacy of the victims of Auschwitz is an obligation and a responsibility for all nations and for the global community gathered here. It is not only about protecting minorities such as Sinti and Roma and Jews. It is about the fact that today, more than ever, we must defend our democracy and the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, every year on August 2nd, we commemorate the last 4,300 Sinti and Roma in the German Nazi concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, who were murdered by the SS on this night in 1944, despite fierce resistance. In 2015, the European Parliament declared this day International Holocaust Memorial Day for Sinti and Roma. I appeal to all the member states of the United Nations to recognize August 2nd as International Holocaust Memorial Day for Sinti and Roma, and to commemorate this year's 80th anniversary at the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial in a dignified manner. I would like to call on young people around the world, in particular, to carry the memories of us eyewitnesses and the remembrance into the future. I hope that you will stand up for democracy and against anti-Gypsyism, anti-Semitism, and all forms of racism with courage and commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Field, for traveling all the way from Germany to be with us today and to share such a moving story. It is a privilege to have survivors like you share with us your experiences, and we're also grateful when the children and grandchildren of victims and survivors of the Holocaust carry on sharing their tragic family history. And thus, we are very pleased to have Dr. Petra Gelpart and her son, Mr. Patrick Gelpart, with us today. Dr. Gelpart is the granddaughter, Mr. Gelpart is the great-grandson of Helena Margita Nova and Antonin Ruda Hranik, Romani Holocaust survivors. And through their music, Dr. Gelpart and Ms. Gelpart provide testimony to the experiences of their family during the Holocaust. They will perform Auschwitzkat, which means in Auschwitz, using elements from previously existing folk songs. Auschwitzkat was composed by the Auschwitz-Birkenau so-called gypsy camp by one or more Roma interned there during that time. And with the text in Romani, the song has been disseminated with a variety of verses over the decades since the war. Dr. Gelpart learned the first 3 verses from her maternal grandparents and great aunt, all survivors of the Holocaust.
Auschwitzate kerbaro ede odoi beshel mropirano ede beshel gondoline te premande pobiste Kataruska balval purdel Mropirano ushman mukel Ede mukel Paripnaha Ani penjas Ach devle Ciricloro ed eligia mangemro liloro ed eligia mraro mnyake hoi sompanlo Auschwitz Auschwitzate bare boca te soteja la menane ani oda kotormaro he blocaris mi bachta alo sacogive samen mare Andre buti am entrade Te cascamel mukel kere Penelake Baslufte ele Penelake Baslufte ele
Thank you, Dr. Gelpart and Mr. Gelpart, for that incredibly moving and stirring performance. And it is my pleasure now to invite sisters and Holocaust survivors Dr. Edith Tenenbaum Shapiro and Ms. Selma Tenenbaum Rawson to share with us their testimony. Dr. Shapiro's son Mark and Ms. Rawson's son Barry will accompany them. And they are joined by the violinist, Mr. Dora Na. And as they make their way to the stage, I'll just let you know that Mr. Na will begin by playing a composition. It's called Mein Stadtteilbelz, composed by Alexandra Olshanetsky. This piece reminds them of their parents, and the words to the melody speak of longing for a happier time, for their home that existed before.
was 4 and Selma was 3 years old in 1939 when World War II reached us in Złotów, Poland, now Złotów, Ukraine. Our mother and father, Linka and Lipa Tenenbaum, were both lawyers. We lived with our father's parents above grandfather's paper goods and printing factory. Mother's mother lived nearby. We celebrated Jewish holidays and we assimilated into Polish culture. I have happy memories of our pre-war life. Guests around the candlelit table talking and singing, horse and buggy trips to the forests of the neighboring Yelachowice.
I have no memory of life before the war. First came the Russians, then the Germans, then the Russians again. Each time, bombs fell. I saw strings hanging from a plane and wondered what they were. I heard a boom. Someone scooped me up and rushed me to the cellar. I was afraid, but this became my normal. I think of myself back then as a little animal that lived in a dangerous forest. Outside are enemies, and that's the way life is. You either survive or you don't, but you have your parents to protect you. Our parents created an imaginary existence for us. We pretended to be at school and at the park. We played cards and homemade board games, and we were early and avid readers. Father taught us sign language so we could communicate when we had to be quiet.
Our grandparents fled to Lvov, now Lviv, to avoid deportation to Siberia. The Russians ordered father to work in the factory. Even though the Russians took away our home, our parents' careers, and grandfather's business, we were not afraid for our lives. That changed when the Germans came to Złotów on July 1st, 1941. We learned a new word, Aktion, Jew hunt. The Germans ordered father to continue working in the factory. This gave him access to the factory building and access to information. He learned of an imminent Jew hunt. Our family and neighbors hustled to the factory attic. Selma and I were instructed to keep absolutely quiet because the attic was not insulated. We heard shots and screams. Our parents shushed and hugged us.
Jews were shot on sight on the streets and systematically executed in the jail on the outskirts of town. 3,000 Jews were killed in that first action. The factory, which still stands today, saved us and others many times. When the Jew hunt ended, we returned to our apartment. The body of a murdered neighbor lay in our courtyard for several days. Mother said to look the other way, but we could not shut out the smell. The Germans mandated that Jews wear armbands and issued edicts abolishing our rights. These were published in the factory where father still worked. During the next 16 months, the Germans initiated 2 more Jew hunts. They claimed that the Jews were being transported to the Belzec and Latsky concentration camps for work. When it became evident that most captured Jews and older children were being murdered, our parents gave us away to Christian friends.
At first, I was given away without Selma because supposedly I looked less Jewish. But I didn't want to be without her, so I climbed through a window and ran back to my family. The second time, both Selma and I were given away. This time, we climbed through the window together. Mother was never happy with giving us away, so the new plan was for us to pass as a family of non-Jews. We were taught Catholic prayers.
In December of 1942, swaths of Jews were forced into a walled ghetto with 30 people per apartment. Typhus broke out in the ghetto. Afraid of catching it, the Germans ordered Father to live outside the ghetto. Father contrived to take us all with him. Both grandmothers caught typhus. I remember seeing my father crying after holding a mirror to his mother's mouth and realizing that she had died. The fourth and final Jew hunt broke out. Swaths was to be Judenrein, Jew-free. We hid in a bunker. Germans came looking for us. Our Polish neighbors lied and told them, no Jews here. Unexpectedly, Helena Strzeszewska, our Polish summer landlord and friend, appeared at the trapdoor of our bunker and said, come with me.
Helena and her two Ukrainian tenants, Misha and Hrich, hid us and two more Jewish families in her 3-room cottage for 15 months and 7 days until liberation. Helena was in the end room, Misha and Hrich in the middle, we in the third. Beneath an adjoining porch, the men dug a 3-foot tunnel. When danger approached, Misha would sing Wieczorny dzwon, Evening Bells, the song that you will now hear. As Misha sang, we rushed to the tunnel. The Yellochowice forest next to us became the execution ground for the remainder of Złotów Jews. We heard the shots. Somebody said, I can smell the corpses. So I started to cry.
Toward the end of the war, different groups of German soldiers occupied Helena's room. They never explored the house. If we had been found, we, Helena, Misha, and Hrich, would have been murdered. On July 17, 1944, we were liberated by the Russians. Out of 10,000 Złotów Jews, about 100 survived. 6 of them were children, of which Edith and I were 2. Father repeatedly said that we survived by chance. It was really a matter of luck. Helena, Misha, and Hrich saved 15 Jews. They have been recognized as righteous Gentiles.
We learned after liberation that grandfather had poisoned himself with cyanide on the way to a camp. When he was 88 years old, Father wrote us a letter that he said was the most difficult he had ever written. He and Mother often wondered how we felt knowing they were planning to poison us and themselves with cyanide if we were captured during the Jew hunts. We never spoke with Father about the cyanide.
After crossing 3 borders illegally, we were able to come into the USA legally. Miraculously, we were able to make new lives. We are very grateful to this country.
Now in our 80s, we live our lives, which continue to be so good, in the knowledge that when we were girls, people who did not know us wanted us dead.
They wanted to kill us.
They wanted to kill our family.
Had they succeeded, we would not have had our husbands, our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, whom we love with all of our hearts.
We would not have done productive work.
We would not be here in this hopeful place talking to you today.
We have seen that hatred can be very strong.
But we can be strong.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shapiro and Ms. Rosen, for your stirring testimony and experience, and also your words of encouragement and hope. Thank you also, Mr. Na, for your evocative performance. We now ask Cantor Singer to recite the memorial prayer. Please, can I ask those who can stand to stand up for this prayer?
במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, לשמות 6 מיליוני היהודים, אחינו ואחיותינו, אנשים, נשים וטף, שהומתו ושנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנטבחו ושנחנקו ושנשרפו חיים על קידוש השם. באושוויץ, Birkenau, Majdanek, Treblinka, Sobibor, ובשאר מחנות המוות, מחנות הריכוז והגטאות באירופה, על ידי הצוררים הנאצים ועוזריהם, יימח שמם וזכרם. בעבור שכל העם היהודי ואומות העולם מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם בגן עדן, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו ושלום על משכבותיהם ונאמר אמן.
Thank you, Cantor Singer. Your Excellencies, dear guests, dear survivors, thank you for being with us today. And as we close, I would like to kindly ask you just to remain in your seats for a few minutes as we wait for the Secretary General and our esteemed speakers to leave the hall. Thank you.